Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, Trump and Putin's face-to-face summit in Alaska.
Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are set to meet in Alaska for talks on the war in Ukraine. But concern is increasing in Kyiv and among its European allies over fears of being sidelined.
What's the point if President Zelenskyy of Ukraine is not invited to the table? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. My guest today has the view from Moscow. I spoke to him on Thursday, a day ahead of the summit.
I'm Osama bin Javaid. I'm a senior correspondent for Al Jazeera English, and I usually cover conflict zones. But because we're in Russia, which has 11 time zones, so I'm talking to you from Moscow.
11 time zones. Well, I really appreciate you taking a little bit of your time to talk to us. Osama, welcome to The Take. This meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump is a one-on-one, face-to-face summit in the U.S. to discuss the end of Russia's war in Ukraine. Why is this meeting so important? And why now?
Well, there are a number of reasons why this is happening now. It is happening when you see the Russians expanding their control on eastern Ukraine. They're consolidating their positions in multiple locations, and they're taking more areas. More importantly, in Donbass in the last 24 hours, where they have taken positions 10 kilometers further towards a very crucial highway, which links all of the Donbass strongholds that the Ukrainians still control. This is happening where the Ukrainians have been admitting that they're facing a number of shortfalls, including personnel. That's why they see the flank faltering a bit. It's happening when the U.S. president is on a spree of solving world crises. It is happening when the world is entering 3.5 years and further sanctions against Russia. It is happening when Vladimir Putin wants to show the world that he can split the international community and tell the United States president to just meet him without the Europeans or the Ukrainians involved. So there's a multitude of reasons that this is happening now. If there is no peace between Russia and Ukraine, wider peace in the Western Hemisphere is going to be very difficult. And you have to remember that this war is inching closer to Zaporizhia, which is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. And there's been fighting close to it in the last 3.5 years. And it is on the verge of disaster if, in case, all of these drones that we see flying from both sides, any of them is directed towards it. So far, we've averted disaster, but that doesn't mean that it either diminishes or moves us away from the risks that this war carries.
Well, I know many people outside of Russia, perhaps, and Alaska might be wondering why Alaska. But there is a historic and a symbolic significance to this location and to having these talks there. What is it, and what do Russians feel about it?
Well, until the late 1800s, Alaska used to be a part of Russia, which was sold for a sum just above $7 million in today's money. So this is quite symbolic, not just for the Russians, but Americans as well. From the Russian perspective, Alaska's status and this taking place in Anchorage at a military base is quite symbolic. And it also goes to show from the Russian perspective that these borders that have been marked by international treaties and boundaries are actually movable if there are countries that agree to it. And that is where this key question lies, that because Vladimir Putin has been very firm in his position of what he wants as the outcome of this war and as an outcome to any peace deal, it has to talk about the territories that Russia has taken from Ukraine. Ukraine says it is not ready to give up an inch of its territory. So Russia is insisting on the position that it has had in the past, where everything goes to its advantage, whether it's the borders, it's the territory it's taken, or the Ukrainian ambitions. That it will continue to keep its hold on everything that it's taken and annexed.
Okay, we're going to get a little bit more into those demands and what each side wants out of this summit. But there is one person who will not be in the room when it happens, and that's Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who wasn't invited to the summit. The White House called it a listening exercise and said they'll include Zelenskyy later. And then in what looks like a consolation prize, Trump held a virtual meeting with Zelenskyy and other European leaders on Wednesday. And in a press conference afterwards, Zelenskyy laid out his conditions.
Russia cannot have a veto right over Ukraine's European and NATO perspectives, and peace talks should be combined with appropriate pressure on Russia. Sanctions must be in place, and they must be strengthened if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire in Alaska.
Him not being there, though, what's the strategy here?
Well, if you look at it from the Russian perspective, this is a win. They've been able to split the support for the Ukrainian side into the Europeans versus the Americans. It is important to note who is actually going to be there, but it is also noteworthy that the Ukrainian president is not going to be there. And it's not just President Zelenskyy, his European counterparts and European allies are not going to be represented in that meeting as well. You have to remember that in the last 3.5 years, these two sides have been crucial in this war that after the Russian invasion, Ukraine has been fighting. It is American weapons, it is European intelligence, it is manpower, it is everything that has been able to help the Ukrainians fight against a much larger, much bigger enemy and maintain control of whatever front lines they have left. This is a very extraordinary summit because summits of this nature between presidents who haven't met for years and years, between two Cold War arch rivals, will take months, if not years, to plan. And this is happening on a week's notice. So visas and logistics and everything else had to be on supercharged mode. You just now are seeing the US Treasury lifting some of those sanctions, albeit temporarily, making it clear that it is not going to be lifting any sanctions on any assets or any funds, but only those parts which are needed to facilitate this meeting are being lifted until August the 20th. Whatever the outcome of this may be, this is going to be beneficial not just for Russia, but for Russian partners as well.
You mentioned everything that Zelenskyy has been doing. What has he been doing? There
was this important summit in Berlin where he traveled to and had a teleconference with European leaders as well as the US president. And now on Thursday, he is actually in the UK meeting the UK Prime Minister. He came out with a statement that he's been able to secure $1.5 billion with which he'd be able to buy American weapons. So this diplomacy is important because not just the Europeans are feeling left out, it's the Ukrainians as well. There's a lot of pessimism that we've been hearing from the Ukrainian side about what's the outcome of this meeting. What will it mean? Will President Trump throw them under the bus? Is there going to be no compromise when it comes to what the Ukrainians want? So there's a lot of those questions. And President Trump, in the lead up to this, has been assuring the Ukrainians. He came out and he said this is going to be a great meeting, saying that this is going to be a listening exercise. He just gave an interview to a local US network saying that this is going to result in something concrete. So there's been this flip-flop that you're seeing from the American side, while the Russian position has remained that of strategic silence and consistency in what they want as an outcome.
Something concrete. Okay, you are in Moscow. Is there a feeling that that is what this could lead to? Something concrete?
I've been speaking to people who have fought on the battlefield. I've been speaking to analysts, academics, and the feeling is that there is a hope that this moves the needle in one way or the other because there's been stagnation of this conflict and nothing has changed. But there wasn't a lot of hope until when this delegation was announced. So now you have the Russian foreign minister, the Russian defense minister, the Russian finance minister, special advisor to Vladimir Putin, and in presidential aid, all part of this high-power delegation. I spoke to somebody and I asked them, what does this mean? And does this give you hope? And they told me that if you understand Russian politics, if on the fly, President Vladimir Putin will have to take decisions, by law, he's going to have to consult his closest members of parliament, which is his cabinet, and he's taking everyone along with him. It also gives hope to people here because it's not just going to be about Ukraine, but also about a bilateral relationship, including some sort of energy contracts between the United States and Russia on the Arctic front. So it's quite ambiguous, but it appears to show with that level of seriousness that is being shown by the Russians that they really want something concrete to come out.
More with Osama bin Javaid after the break. Osama, what is at stake for all the sides here, because President Trump said on Monday that both Ukraine and Russia would have to cede territory to each other to end the war. Trump told a White House press conference there will be some land swapping going on.
There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody. To the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both.
And then on Wednesday, he said there'd be consequences if Putin does not agree to stop the war after this summit. So what do you see as what's really at stake here?
Well, let's rewind to last week. Last week, President Trump sent his special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, somebody who's not a career diplomat, somebody who's known for his business-like skills of negotiation, to Russia. Came with the message where ideas were exchanged, and it was decided that these two sides are going to meet. There was initial talk of trying to bring in the Ukrainian president, which hasn't happened because the Russian president has been very clear, saying that he does not want a meeting with Zelenskyy unless the groundwork is being done. So what does that groundwork look like? From the Russian perspective, that groundwork is that the Ukrainians will have to give up their ambitions to join NATO, that Ukraine will have to guarantee that it is not used as a staging point for attacks against Russia by the entire Western Hemisphere, that meaning the European Union and the Americans. And also, Russia will get to keep all of the territory that it has taken and annexed, including Crimea and Donetsk and other regions. Now, when the US president talks about territory which will have to be exchanged, it will probably mean areas like Kharkiv and Sumy, those regions where there's been fighting but are not essentially predominantly Russian speakers as Russia sees it.
The ceding territory. You have covered many conflicts all around the world over the years. What do you make of that demand? Because it looks like it's one of Russia's red lines.
Well, it does appear that way, that Vladimir Putin is going to see it as a red line. And it would be a win for the US president if he can persuade him to change his mind. But remember that all of these conflicts that we've seen in the past have some compromise. So could this become another Cyprus-like situation? Could this become another Kashmir, where all of those front lines are frozen for an indefinite period of time and it becomes sort of a line of contact or a line of control, and all sides cease fire and stop trying to take more territory or gain territory back? Would it mean another compromise when it comes to the people of that region? Remember, people in Donetsk, since its annexation, and this goes back to 2014, a lot of them have now Russian passports. They carry Russian citizenship. So they already feel as they are part of Russia because they are Russian speakers. And historically, from the Ukrainian side, there's been a push against the Russian language and against people who speak the Russian language. So it will be interesting to see where those compromises actually are made, because a lot of them will have to be made by both sides, not just in terms of territory, but also in terms of people. And in terms of how they are able to live as neighbors, because remember, these both countries have to live side by side with each other. Whether they're living as partners or as adversaries is going to be determined by these two sides, not just the United States.
Right. Well, Donald Trump promised during his election campaign to end the war on day one. That didn't happen. He's also made no secret that he sees himself as worthy of the Nobel Prize. But European leaders have urged him not to strike a unilateral deal. What is at risk for Ukraine if he does, especially in pursuit of those other goals of ending this war and it perhaps leading to a Nobel?
Well, it is very difficult to say whether the US president is going to be able to win the Nobel Peace Prize, but he's got people campaigning for it, including the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But in terms of the realpolitik of this, you actually have to see the Donald Trump, who actually just lambasted the Ukrainian president in the White House in that first meeting. It was quite a sight to behold, which he ended with saying that that was great television, wasn't it? And then you have the Donald Trump, who is being close to the Russian president. Go back to Donald Trump presidency #1, where there was a lot of allegations about Russian interference in U.S. elections, to Donald Trump saying he is going to end the conflict on day one, apparently more than 50 times during his campaign, not being able to achieve that. And now is his opportunity to tell his people that he can actually persuade Vladimir Putin to do something that he hasn't been able to do. But also, what will it mean for the security of the entire region? There's ramifications of energy for European consumers, the ramifications for costs of living that have been going up on both sides. Everything has to be taken into consideration. And that's why, if you look at the wider picture of what is at stake here, it will be wise, as many people have said, for all of these sides to make a compromise.
Osama, you touched on that contentious, shall we say, meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump at the White House. That was back in February. And this summit that we're seeing this week is a far cry from that meeting. That was a televised Oval Office visit that saw Trump and Zelenskyy verbally sparring, with Trump saying Zelenskyy was unthankful for U.S. support, and Zelenskyy later saying the meeting was regrettable.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the
headed.
cards right now.
Is there a concern that this summit will further distance Trump from Zelenskyy and bring him closer to Putin?
Well, you see, the U.S. president is anything but consistent. You've seen him spar against Zelenskyy, and you've seen him embrace him in various other meetings as well. But again, you're talking about Donald Trump here, who can go from a completely different point of view to another point of view in a span of a few hours. This is a Donald Trump who has called Vladimir Putin absolutely crazy and said that, he doesn't understand why is he killing people. This is the Donald Trump who's thanked Putin on multiple other occasions. So it will all boil down to that room between these two men and their interpreters. Because remember, as Trump reminded Zelenskyy, without the US support, it will be very difficult for them to hold on to the positions that they are holding on to. It's US intelligence support, it's US satellite support, it's US weaponry. And that is what is at stake. If Trump decides that he pulls out of that war as a partner with Ukraine, that would mean disaster for Ukraine. But if Trump decides that he is going to live by whatever he's promised the Europeans and the Ukrainians, this could mean hope to try and bring both of these sides together, because he does have sway over Vladimir Putin as well.
Well, Osama, you are speaking to us from the Moscow Bureau. So on your walks around, give me a sense of the temperature. What are you feeling the mood on the ground is when it comes to not only these talks, this summit, but also this war, and whether or not Russians actually see an end to the war coming?
Well, I've been to Moscow multiple times, and you would not be mistaken if you felt that there is no war in Moscow, because even after those drone strikes that we saw hit the Kremlin, those sirens that we heard in Moscow, those buildings that were destroyed by Ukrainian drones, the internet blockade that you feel on any given day, people are going about their lives. I was surprised at the number of international tourists. And this year, that number has jumped from 200,000 in 2022 to about 3 million people who have visited Russia. So people here, going about their everyday lives, don't really think about the war. And there are a lot of people who will tell you that they're pessimistic about any outcome. People who say enough is enough and there should be peace. Remember that it is very difficult for you to air your opinion here in the streets, because if you say you're against the war, it could land you in jail.
Yeah. What about the people who are fighting, or people who have family members who are on the front lines? What is it feeling like for them?
Well, we've been speaking to veterans of the war, people who've come back, people who've lost limbs, people who are going through therapy. We also interviewed somebody who belonged to the former Wagner group. Remember, this is a group which once marched towards Moscow and actually downed a helicopter from the Russian military. So meeting a former member of Wagner, I asked him in front of his big Wagner flag, what does he feel should be the outcome of this? And does he miss the front lines? And does he want to go back? So this 53-year-old man told me that he fought for his country. He did what he thought was right at that time. He fought for 2 years, but he does not miss the trenches. And he hopes that there will be peace. And he told me that is the sentiment amongst many of his comrades who've come back from the front line. So it appears that, yes, the Russians can say and the media can portray that they're winning the war, but with the people who are actually in the trenches, who are fighting for their country, whose number has grown since the war actually started, actually do want peace. And not just them, but their families as well.
And that's The Take. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to give it a like so more people can find this show. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what stood out to you or if there's anything you'd like us to dive deeper into next time. Our team is always checking in, so let's keep the conversation going. I'll see you tomorrow.